Hi, I'm here today with Nathan Pearce. Nathan's the Programme Director for Sharing Cities, and he's head of the Smart London team at the Greater London Authority. Nathan, the Sharing Cities programme has been going for 5 years now and is due to report this year. Can you tell me a bit about the programme and what the results of the work are likely to be?
Yeah, sure, not a problem. Thank you very much for having me on here, Peter, as well. So the Sharing Cities programme is a Horizon 2020 European funded smart city project, which we run from the Greater London Authority. We're the coordinating partner of 35 partners. So it's a big partnership that cuts across academic institutions. So, for example, we've got Imperial College here from London, and private sector partners such as Siemens and some smaller businesses as well. And then also public sector agencies, which are mainly made up of the 6 cities that are part of Sharing Cities. So we have Greenwich, which is here in London. We have Milan in Italy, and we have Lisbon in Portugal, are what we call our 3 lighthouse cities, and which is where we're testing the technology, and it's all 100% grant funded to be tested in those 3 cities. And then we have what we call our fellow cities, or our replication cities, which are Bordeaux in France, Burgas in Bulgaria, and Warsaw in Poland. And they are currently replicating what works from the lighthouse cities, drawing on their learning, drawing on the information and the business models that have come out of the technology that we've tested. And the technology that we've tested cuts across 3 or 4 different areas. So we've been testing a lot of stuff in terms of retrofitting buildings with smart measures and smart controls, mainly around energy efficiency and the feel and comfort of living in these blocks, mainly public sector housing, but we have also done some historical buildings and some private sector dwellings as well. And that probably accounts for the bulk of the funding that's gone into this program there. That's the kind of largest, most complex stuff that we've been doing. We've also done a lot of stuff around mobility, so electric bikes, electric cars, e-logistics. So you're seeing a theme here, a lot around electric and enabling low carbon forms of transport, and also working on mobility as a service approach. We've done a lot around citizen engagement, how you can start to digitize that and how you can encourage positive behavior change through various digital means. And we've been doing lots of smart lampposts everywhere, sensor arrays. And then finally, we've been working on data platforms which is the glue that brings all of this smart city technology together, is where the data from all of these sensors and technologies feeds in, and where we can apply analytics and start to use it to commission services more effectively and improve the way that we deliver. So it's a big project. As you said, we're in the last year, 24 million in funding went in, so there's a lot that we're hoping to get out. We're currently in that monitoring phase, and most things have been implemented already. However, I don't know if this is an exclusive announcement for you, Peter, but we've had an extension to the programme now, given all of the problems that we've had with coronavirus. So it looks like we will probably be going into 2021 now, potentially to the end of 2021, just to make sure that we get really good monitoring information and detailed information on the impact that these measures have had. Because a big problem that we're having, particularly with our mobility measures right now, is no one is using them.
Yeah, and your continuing involvement not affected by Brexit, I hope.
No, we were fortunately far enough the other side of when the Brexit vote happened that our project has always been protected, as it were. I think with a programme of this size of complexity, to be honest, it's harder to unpick the contracts than it is to just let it continue and finish. So no, we've had commitments from both the Commission and the UK Treasury that our programme will finish.
Very good. Now, you mentioned some work on retrofitting of council homes, and I think a big scheme at Greenwich involved that to improve their energy efficiency. So can you tell us about the wider relevance of that? I mean, certainly improving the performance of existing buildings is one of our most intractable problems, really. Have you found the solution?
Well, we have found some solutions, I think would be our work with massive caveats. But yeah, we've had some incredible results. In Greenwich, the technology that we're testing, I mean, it's important to remember that it may not seem that innovative now, some of the stuff that we put into our buildings, though I still think some parts of it are. But you must remember that we first put this bid in nearly 6 years ago. So when we were saying that this was innovative technology, it was 6 years ago. What's really important about sharing cities is that we have actually tested this stuff in anger. Even though lots of people have heard about this kind of technology and smart controls, we have actually deployed it at scale for probably the first time, certainly the first time in London. So some of the stuff that we've been looking at, you rightly say, is Greenwich is our test area. We've retrofitted some 4 or 5 large 1930s, I'd say 1940s public sector blocks. So I think it covers around about nearly 100 apartments in that whole area. And we first of all had to do some traditional energy saving measures. So you had to insulate the buildings. No good putting smart controls on a building that's not insulated in the first place. So we did some more traditional retrofitting. But then we put in loads of technology in terms of heating controls, lighting controls, better connectivity, ways that you can engage with the porter, heating systems, energy management systems, renewable energy systems. So we threw the whole lot at it, sensors, LED lighting, to kind of to test that theory of not just looking at one specific type of technology, but what happens when you fit out a building with all of the latest technology that you have available, and doing it at scale as well. So some of the results that we've seen from that, early results, we're looking at, say, 50 to 60% energy reduction in the buildings that we've retrofitted. So we're really happy with that. That does include, traditional, as I said, insulation and stuff, but the smart controls are definitely contributing a huge amount on top of that. For example, we have worked with Imperial College London and a couple of other private partners to develop a sustainable energy management system which manages energy, a bit like a building energy management system, but not in one specific building, across a district area. And that alone, which is effectively an algorithm that manages various inputs and outputs, contributed a 10% saving on top of the retrofitted savings. So this kind of technology is proving its case, and we're looking at how we can potentially scale this up, not only across Greenwich, but in areas like the new Olympic Park development and some of the other big developments that are taking place across London. And as you said, retrofitting buildings is really important to you. It's really important to us. The Mayor has a lot of targets about more housing. Part of that more housing mix is bringing existing housing up to scratch.
As head of the Smart London team, you're responsible for delivering the Mayor's Smarter London Together roadmap. Can you tell me a bit about the impact you see this having on the built environment sector and how you're helping to deliver smarter districts like the Royals you've just mentioned, but also Old Oak Common?
Yeah, so a lot of what we're doing is it works best at a kind of ward or district level. I think sometimes the business model for a specific piece of smart technology doesn't always stack up, but when you combine it with a data platform, when you combine it with a sensor array, the business model starts to make a bit more sense. So one of the big bits of learning that came out of sharing cities is the viability of doing this technology works much more effectively at a larger level, particularly when you don't want to go in and have to do separate resident engagement with every single different type of technology that you're installing. And actually resident engagement was both some of the most important things that we did and some of the most time consuming things that we did, because some of this technology is new, some of it can be scary. There's all the stories about surveillance and so on. So I think that's a really important bit of learning that we're now taking from sharing cities, and we're going to use it on these new developments, what we call in the London Plan opportunity areas, which I'm sure is a phrase that you know well, and some of our really big developments. And the big developments in London are the Olympic Park, the Royal Docks, Old Oak Common, and Canada Water. Currently are the big developments in the pipeline, and there's also lots and lots of opportunity areas across the rest of London. So Some of the things that we're directly taking out of sharing cities for that is learning around citizen engagement, information from monitoring, what actually worked, what didn't, how viable it is, business models, creating common templates. How do we then work with boroughs to start to understand what we've got in our business models, and create some kind of commonality across London. And we're wrapping this up in a project that we're calling Smart Districts, where we're creating what we're trying to avoid is we don't want to tell any borough or planning authority what technology to buy. What we want to do is we want to create a framework that supports them to be able to commission technology with the most amount of confidence that we can. So once they've decided that something is important for that area and there's a technological solution for it, we're creating a pack of guidance, as you will, a framework that takes them through the various steps that they need to consider when they're purchasing that kind of technology, typically Internet of Things technology. So that's looking at things like cybersecurity, it's looking at things like ethics, governance, it's looking at things like obsolescence and the longevity of the products that they're buying, it's looking at business models. It provides guidance on how to commission from an outcome point of view, which is something that we're really keen to push. Many of your listeners and readers would have heard of the Sidewalk Labs in Canada, how the project has finished recently. And for us, that's almost the exact opposite way that we would like Internet of Things technology to be developed in London, where they went from the solution, which was then applied to a neighbourhood. We want to work with boroughs to look at what their outcomes and needs are, and then you go and find technological solutions that can help you with those. So all of this guidance, and there's much more than that, which is learning that's come from Sharing Cities and other projects, we're building into what we're calling the London IoT framework, which is in its second draft at the moment, which we're hoping to test with Oldham, the Olympic site, and also a project down in Sutton and potentially one in Westminster as well. So it's really about making sure that we get the most out of being part of the Sharing Cities project, and we maximise the benefit for London.
So now, Theo Blackwell, who's the Chief Digital Officer in City Hall, he called 2020 the year of city data. So with everything that's happening with COVID-19, home working, tracking, virtual planning, that's surely proving to be the case. So as in many areas, the pandemic is accelerating change. How do you see the role of data as we come out of the crisis in urban planning and urban development?
I mean, I think the role of data has always been really, really important. But yes, you're right, it's going to take on much, much more importance now. Although, unfortunately, I think the COVID crisis has probably shone a light on how bad our data collection actually is in London, and how much we have left to do. I think there are pockets of excellence in London. There's data sets, and there's certain kind of monitoring in place in London where we have a lot of very rich and detailed information about the area, and then there's some things where we have very little. And I think one thing that this crisis is doing is teaching us where our gaps are and how we can start to fulfill them. But I think there's a number of things that are really important about data right now. We need to do some work, or we are doing some work in the GLA to determine the baseline, you know, what was the situation like before the crisis, so that we can really see what the impact of the crisis is, both in terms of movement of people, in terms of environmental impact, in terms of health impact, and so on. We really want to use data to drive some of the decision making. You know, there are some really big decisions that need to be made as we recover from this crisis, some very difficult decisions. And the more that is based on the reality and the data that we've got about how this crisis has had an impact, the better. It's also really starting to lay bare the interdependencies between lots of different services that might have somewhat been taken for granted before, particularly the way that networks and infrastructure interacts with services like healthcare and social care. This is something that the crisis has highlighted, and an area where we need to focus on them. I think what I'd say on this finally is the data is going to be really, really important to help us identify where we need to be investing. And this is something that has certainly created quite a lot of interest. In my area specifically, we've got a bit of a challenge in London in terms of fragmentation. So there's 33 boroughs in London, so there's no one data platform or one data set. So that leads quite a bit of a tricky problem getting hold of information in the first place. And actually, most data is from sensors that are privately owned. So that's a whole other level of complexity in itself. So we're doing a bit of work. The London Data Store team at the GLA are currently working hard on I think they're still calling it London Data Store 3.0, but it's a redesign of the London Data Store. It's a redesign of the service, maintaining the open platform principles, but starting to create a platform which is much more capable of accepting data from Internet of Things, from private sources, so that we can start to build up a much more detailed map of London. We're not necessarily calling it a digital twin, but it is that kind of approach to data mapping in London.
And because the mayor is also looking to use computer modeling much more in the planning system as well, presumably all that sort of data feeds into his decision making as well.
Yeah, totally. And even before this crisis, we were looking at a lot of things. We've digitized our planning applications. We've got an incredible portal that we've designed recently that has all planning applications in London, plus all utility works and traffic information, all layered on top of each other, which is really great for planners and also master planners and developers and so on. We're looking at how we can start to standardize and digitize the planning application process, which I think is long overdue. As anyone knows who's tried to navigate things, every borough is wonderfully different and has their own approach to things. This is all stuff that we're working on already, and this situation that we're currently in is only accelerating it as well. And we're looking at some quite innovative stuff around this. Also, we're talking to the European Space Agency. There's a potential project that we could work with on them, where they can map the development of some of our projects in London from space, and you can actually see in real time how a planning application is playing out. So there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on. And I think the COVID crisis hasn't necessarily generated new activity, it's accelerated activity that was already taking place in this area.
Very good. Well, Nathan, thank you very much for sharing your views on this, and very interesting to find out. We'll put a link at the end of this program to as many of those websites as you mentioned, so that people can find out more about what you're delivering in terms of a smarter London. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Thank you.